Today's video is sponsored by Audible, and they're giving away 1 free month, linked in the description below. Now this month, I'd love for you guys to check out the copy of Dark Lord: The Rise of Darth Vader. Now with Audible, you're going to be getting a ton of voice acting, officially licensed Star Wars music, sound effects, and crisp narration. This is my go-to for all Star Wars audiobooks out there, as well as anything else not to do with Star Wars too. Things like horror, drama, cooking even, podcasts, news, and everything else. Now, Dark Lord: The Rise of Darth Vader takes place after Revenge of the Sith, and it covers the story mainly of Vader after this time. This audiobook is amazing because it shows the connection between Vader and Anakin, and as Anakin is now becoming this masked man, we get to learn so many different things about him in this time, including how his whole suit actually connects to his nervous system and how it's very painful to put on, that there's thousands of needles in the suit itself that attach into his body. The other stuff that's really cool is his inner monologue as he goes back to the Jedi Temple. He's going over so many of the different memories that he had during Order 66. The other awesome thing with Audible is that each month you are subscribed, you get a free token to another audiobook of your choice. Now, whether that's Star Wars or some other genre, that's your choice. They have thousands and thousands of different titles for you to choose from. Check the links and info in the description to grab your free month, or go to audible.com/Star Wars Theory, or text Star Wars Theory to 500 500. That's Star Wars Theory to 500 500. Grab your free month, you won't be disappointed, and I'll see you guys in the video. So finally, a few days have passed now since the Kenobi finale, and if you haven't been spoiled on the internet, well, then this video probably won't spoil it. But I want to talk about something that a lot of people are talking, a lot of you guys are talking about and discussing. It's the Vader versus Kenobi fight, of course. Now, in that fight, we got a lot of different things to talk about, which I'm going to make different videos on. But for today, I would like to talk about why Vader actually lost. Now, this harkens back to an old series on the channel that I always loved doing, and I will do many more in proper fashion, not just me talking with the camera, which was called the Versus series, or Who is More Powerful series, where I would pit together different characters in a fictitious setting, on top of Star Wars being fictitious. I would have them fight, and we would go over their lightsaber fighting style, their overall mentality, psychology, force powers, and so on and so forth. Now, in this situation, we don't have to do that because they actually fought, and this is canon. They now fought for real, once again, before A New Hope and after Revenge of the Sith. So, let's go over the fight a little bit. Okay. It seems like Vader is getting the upper hand for some moments. Now, I do want to definitely mention that Vader does have more Force abilities than Obi-Wan, even at this time. Now, once again, I don't think Vader lost because he was weaker than Obi-Wan here. I think Obi-Wan is just the better fighter. I think Vader is so distraught by the dark side and the light side. He is so conflicted, I believe, that it just doesn't allow him to properly let go and choose one side. He's almost like a fence sitter a little bit, in the sense where he just wavers back and forth, and he's not fully committed. He is, but he's not all the way in there, and he never really is. And this is why Luke is able to bring him back. Because if he was fully there, if he did fully kill Anakin Skywalker, like he says he did, well, Luke would never be able to resurrect Anakin. There's always that little tiny bit of Anakin still residing within him. And as Palpatine said, actually Palpatine gave us the answer to this at the end of the show. And how cool was it to see Ian McDiarmid again? You know, big shout out to him. He looks great. Sidious tells him, and he knows, his insight is very, very powerful. He says, "Perhaps your feelings for your old master have you weakened." And of course Vader goes and he's listening, and he sits up straight, and he's just like,
"Kenobi means nothing to me. I only serve you, master."
And of course Sidious smirks, but he knows that Anakin is always in there. He knows that Vader is always conflicted, and he's never fully giving himself to the dark side. Now, I think if Vader had given himself to the dark side completely when he was fighting Kenobi and not be conflicted, either by not wanting to really commit to killing his master, he was conflicted with the fact that this is Obi-Wan Kenobi and was distracting him. His anger, his rage, all of that was still, you know, working to his dark side abilities. But it was, once again, his overconfidence was getting the best of him. And he didn't really realize that Obi-Wan is now back to where he was in Revenge of the Sith. He is at that power level again, with just a little bit of weakness still. And I really noticed this when Obi-Wan was struggling with the big boulder pillar, and Vader was just like so easily controlling it, and while talking to him, and then just pushes it away. So obviously Vader is more powerful than Obi-Wan in the Force. I think Anakin was always more powerful than Obi-Wan in the Force. Maybe Revenge of the Sith, they were like pretty much equally matched, but I mean, you know, you got to think Anakin had only been training as a Jedi for what, like 13 years? And Obi-Wan all his life, you know. So there were many other reasons besides that Vader lost. Let's go to the obvious. He's Vader. He is in this mechanical body now. He doesn't move the same way Anakin did. His chest box is such a liability, and we saw that when Obi-Wan was just crushing it with the hilt of his, which was actually a cool move, with the hilt of his saber, with the butt of it, and we saw Vader was unable to breathe. I mean, once you can't really breathe, it's sort of game over at that point. Now, he could have sustained himself with the Force if he wanted to, but we gotta realize this is not Darth Vader like we really know and think about, right? This is not Darth Vader in the comics that's like just near A New Hope or after A New Hope. This is still 10 years before all that stuff. So he is really only half the man that he becomes, half the machine he becomes. He's still got a lot to learn mentally, he's still got a lot to learn physically with his body, and his cybernetics, Sidious gave him literally the worst. Like outdated tech, stuff that you would never use in today's world, you know, in the Star Wars world. Grievous's technology was up to date. Grievous's technology was better than what Vader had. Think about that. And this is a Jedi Knight who was so used to being able to just move fluidly with his body. Now, these cybernetics are so out of date that I would even bet that they are worse than the one that he got on his arm when Dooku chopped it off in Episode 2, Attack of the Clones. And now in the Brotherhood book, which is canon, and you guys have heard me say this a few times now, if you haven't, welcome to the channel. The book vehemently goes over how his hand, his new robotic hand, is actually very weird to him. And that while it is still, you know, doing a great job, but it actually lags. So he'll like think something to move something, and he says it's not instant. Like there is a downtime where like between his brain and his actual hand moving. So imagine this, but with your entire body, right? Like imagine like in a fight against someone who is an organic being like Obi-Wan, and Obi-Wan is like already here pretty much at the point, and Vader's like, in his mind, he's blocking it, but he's still back here because everything is that much slower. And when a fight is that fast, you need to be one-to-one with your thoughts and your body, right? Your motor system needs to be on par with what you're thinking, what you want it to do, right? When you move, it moves. Now, in the books and comics, Vader couldn't move his arms over his head. So this is how immobile he was. Not to mention, you know, just his overall ability or inability to actually move like what we saw in the show, him moving like that, is his maximum. Like he was probably about to just break down in a second. Like his bolts would have probably just come apart if he had kept going, because he's not meant to move that way. He's a very clunky figure, and he's not meant to move in this like same fluid way that Anakin moved, and that's why Obi-Wan was just so super fast, but Vader was just clunky. So if anything, that the show like portrayed it in such a more fluid way than, you know, what is actually realistic. So in Revenge of the Sith, when Vader became Vader and he got all of his cybernetic pieces, he had to relearn how to use a lightsaber. He had to relearn how to move, how to fight. So he had to go through all the lightsaber forms again and learn everything all over again. And not to mention with his body being slower than what his mind was trying to do. I mean, just imagine that. You know, you have to relearn everything. You get a whole new body. You know, you're taller, your legs are longer, you're heavier, everything is just different. So, I mean, it's definitely not going to be the same as it was. Now, at Vader's maximum power after his loss to Obi-Wan, he was 80%, only 80%, as powerful as the Emperor. Had he beat Obi-Wan and retained his organic body, his real body, he would have been 200% the power of the Emperor. That Kenobi fight wouldn't have lasted. It would have just been over like that. 80% as powerful as the Emperor is probably near A New Hope to Empire Strikes Back. This is only 10 years after Revenge of the Sith, so this is like, I would argue this is Anakin Skywalker level of power in Revenge of the Sith, except for the fact that he cannot move as fast and he doesn't have the same mobility that he had in terms of like, he can't even like move his body or like arms properly, or, you know, just, he's not mobile. Like, he's slower and he's immobile. But I think his force powers are probably more than Revenge of the Sith. But as we saw, Obi-Wan was just so fast and powerful that Vader didn't have all that much time to use the force because he was too busy getting hit by boulders. Another point, his midichlorians were weaker. This kind of ties into the 80% as powerful as the Emperor part, but if you didn't know, when he lost his limbs, he actually lost a lot of his connection to the Force. One of the main powers that he had, that Anakin had, was his ability to see into the future, and this completely got dusted when he lost to Obi-Wan. Why? I don't know. George wrote it like that. Don't ask me. But that's essentially what happened, and those weren't only the only powers that he lost too. He lost a lot of his abilities in the Force. So while he was still very powerful, he lost a ton of his juice. Now, all of that combined with the fact that he was so unbelievably conflicted against Obi-Wan, I mean, I'm surprised he even made it as far as he did, you know? Now, why did Obi-Wan leave him alive? Why didn't Obi-Wan kill him? I'm going to go over that in another video because that's going to take some time on itself, probably like a while. So these are the reasons, in my opinion, why Vader lost. I don't think necessarily that Obi-Wan is that much better than him. I just think that Vader is so freaking limited physically and also mentally to his own doing because he's so conflicted against Obi-Wan that all of these things are working against him. It's just not going to make for the best chances against his former master, who now is, you know, using even Anakin's moves and using some crazy abilities and moves that we haven't seen him ever do before. Now, if Vader wanted to beat Kenobi, I think he needed to be a little less ballsy. I think he needed to be a little more focused on his hatred for Obi-Wan, and in turn, this would have just made him more and more powerful. I think if he had spent more time practicing against very difficult lightsaber opponents, very powerful lightsaber opponents, I don't think this outcome would have been the same. I think he would have had more practice to really push his new body to the limits and see how far and how crazy these cybernetics can go. Now, of course, in the comics, he fought some pretty worthy adversaries, but of course, none compared to Obi-Wan Kenobi and what Kenobi can really do. So if Vader had had more practice, maybe if him and Sidious were practicing, then perhaps, you know, he would have a better chance because he would really know the extent of his body and his cybernetics. But like this, it just makes sense that Vader lost. And I know a lot of people have a problem with it, but I think it was the right move. I think, you know, for Vader to be beaten that easily makes sense. So stay tuned for the next videos. I'm going to go over a lot of different things, a lot of your questions, and please ask a lot of your questions in the comments. I'd love to make some videos and responses to those as well. Make sure to subscribe to my Star Wars Theory Plus channel, where I take a lot of the highlight discussions from all my videos, just lore videos, nerd theory, just whatever it could be, even videos like this, and I just plant them in there. I actually have a whole team doing all that stuff, so I'm sure you guys will enjoy it. The channel's already doing pretty well, so thanks to everyone who's over there right now. See you in the next one. Let me know what you think in the comments. Until then, remember, the Force will be with you, always.